what was important today.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay,
Go ahead.
this is October 3rd of the year 2000. We're here at Lane Place, and we're about to interview, as a part of our series of interviews of servicemen, Alex Lebedeff. Alex, I want you to tell us right now your date of birth and your correct, what your full name is, and so on. Where were you born? And
All right, Bob. I was born in New Britain, Connecticut, 21 February 1927. My legal name is Alexis Gabriel Lebedeff. The middle name was my father's name. Alexis was his favorite brother. I prefer Alex because that actress, Alexis Smith, ruined a good man's name. Education. Let's start with college. High school isn't that important. I got my Bachelor of Science degree in agriculture from the University of Georgia, June 1949.
how'd you happen to be in Georgia?
My father worked for the Georgia Experiments Station in Griffin, Georgia as a geneticist. And I went to the state school. And I liked Georgia very much. I had some excellent professors there. J. William Firer of the Agricultural Economics Department got me excited about economics, and that's how I chose my major. He was a remarkable man, just had a master's degree, was head of the department, but was one of the best teachers I'd ever had. In fact, Bob, I used his methods of teaching when I was in the classroom at Crawfordsville High School. I never had a social studies methods course in my life. Well, from Georgia, September 1950, I went to the University of Illinois, Department of Agricultural Economics.
How'd you have to go there?
They offered me an assistantship.
Okay.
And I was a graduate assistant, took agricultural economics courses and economics courses on opposite sides of the quadrangle, one department and the other. I received my master's degree August 1950.
Now, Alex, one of the things we started out talking about was the background of your parents, having your father having been not born in the United States.
All right. Dad was born in Kryvyi Rog, Russia in
What's the name?
Kryvyi Rog. This is near Kiev. And
Ukraine.
The Ukraine.
Okay.
He was a Russian though, but he was born in the Ukraine. He came over to the United States in 1923.
And you said he was a geneticist.
That is correct.
Well, how did he get that training? How did he get to be?
All right. Dad went to Connecticut State Agricultural College, got his baccalaureate in 1928, master's at Cornell in 1930, PhD in 1938 in genetics. And in 1943, the family moved to Georgia, where Dad was the plant breeder for the corn project at the Georgia Experiment Station. My mother was first generation of Russian parentage. And we spoke Russian at home. That was the first language I learned. And when I started school, we started speaking English, so I could improve my language skills.
When did you, when you started school, I suppose that was when you started in elementary school?
Yes.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, there you went to college then at, well, you went over to the University of Illinois,
Yes.
Champaign.
That is correct.
Okay.
I was there June 25th, 1950, when the Korean War broke out. I was, in fact, having dinner with a fellow graduate student, and the news came over the radio. That's when I started reading the Chicago Daily News avidly every morning to find out what what was going on in Korea.
All right, go on from there. What happened?
Well, I was fortunate enough to complete my master's work. I was back in Georgia. I had a chance. In fact, I was offered a job teaching veterans in Athens, Georgia, and I was excited. That I thought would be marvelous, back with old friends. I was looking forward to my civilian career. I came home from Atlanta where I had another job interview, and my mother greeted me with the news that I had been recalled to active duty.
Now, recalled, you've been recalled from what?
From the Army, U.S. Army Officers Reserve.
Uh-huh.
That was my commission service. However, I had prior service during World War II.
Well, what was your service in World War II?
I was ordered to Camp Landing, Florida when I was 18 years, 8 weeks old, 18 May 1945. Drafted. I was drafted. Camp Landing was an infantry replacement training center, and I was trained as an infantry rifleman. While there, they made me, for some reason, take one of these foreign language proficiency exams, which obviously I passed. And in early August, I was sent to Indiana University, where I joined Company A of the 1551st Army Specialized Training Unit to study the Russian language. I was at Indiana University till probably mid-October 1945, when we had completed our training, and I was sent to Camp Ritchie, Maryland, to a casual company for 3 weeks. And then I was sent to the Holabird Signal Depot, where I first started out as a clerk in Counterintelligence Corps Supply Office, and then I was assigned to the Foreign Language section as a Russian language instructor. And I served there until, I think it was October 1946, when they were letting people out who were assured of a place to go back to college. My terminal leave was up 5 November 46.
And you went back, and so you got out of the service then?
That is right. I got out of the service in October, reported a little late for the fall quarter at the University of Georgia. And I discovered that my grades improved markedly after the military experience. So I decided I'd better stay at Athens and complete my education.
Okay. And you went on, so you got your degree then, did you?
Yes, I did, June 1949.
Okay. And then, so there was a hiatus there after you got out there, and along came the Korean War. That was about 1950.
That's right. While at Georgia, I joined the Reserve Officer Training Corps and was commissioned second lieutenant in June of 1948. I was an infantry officer. My primary MOS was 1542, which is Infantry Unit Commander. And I attended one reserve unit session in Griffin, Georgia, where I was assigned. And then I went off to the University of Illinois, and I was totally an inactive reservist. So after the Korean War broke out, you realize that in 1948, Louis Johnson, who was Secretary of War, disbanded much of the regular army, so they had to call up the reservists. So I was recalled to active duty.
Couldn't believe it that I was called back. Well, go ahead.
Well, I'm afraid I didn't at first react very favorably to this recall. I remember I had to go meet Dad in downtown Griffin, and I'm very happy none of my friends heard me expounding every step of the way about being recalled to the Army. Anyway, 30 September 1950, I reported to the headquarters and headquarters company of the 95th Military Government Group, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We were told we were being sent to Camp Gordon, Georgia, where we were going to set up a military government school. Well, that lasted till about the middle of November, when we received orders to prepare to go overseas. So we packed up everything. We took a troop train to Camp Stoneman, California, and then we flew into Haneda Air Base in Japan, and we spent from December until March of 1951 at Camp Drake, Japan, which was the home of the 1st Cavalry Division. Then we finally arrived in Korea. We spent probably 2 or 3 weeks at the Busan Assembly Area Detention.
What had happened at Korea by that time?
Oh, by that time, well, the reason we were in a staging area in Japan, the North Koreans broke through, and we just had a toehold in Korea right at the Busan area. Finally, we broke out. MacArthur made that brilliant move and landed troops at Incheon, cut off the army. And then we went in. From Busan, I was assigned primary duty economics officer at the Cholanamdo Civil Affairs team in Gwangju, Korea. And I spent most of my time there. And then I was assigned to Wonju, Korea, where my primary job, Bob, was putting up electric light poles to restore electricity to Wonju, Korea. While I was putting up my poles, this man in a Jeep drives up in his Jeep. He didn't have any shoulder boards on, and I couldn't see the emblem on his hat. And he said, "Who's putting up these sensor-deleted poles in my MSR, main supply route?" "I am." I ducked down, saluted, said, "Sir." He said, "Get these poles out of my road by sundown." So I did. Then I went in, reported to the major, who was his exec officer. "Sir, I am here to report to Colonel Tandy that the poles are out of his MSR." So I went in, met the colonel. He roared and then gave me an earth auger so I could put my poles in much more quickly. Among my other duties,
So now, who was ordering you to take those poles down?
Colonel H.S. Tandy, who was the engineering officer in charge of this section of the main supply route going north. He had been one of Patton's engineering officers, so naturally I was quite impressed, because I thought George S. Patton, despite being a showman, was quite a soldier.
Well, now, tell us a little bit about your experiences. For instance, you mentioned Camp Stoneman. You know, that I was at Camp Stoneman myself. But what happened at Camp Stoneman?
Well, not much. We were waiting for transportation to Korea. We ate food at that officer's mess. Was cheap. I remember you could get a filet mignon for something like $2, and what could we do? We just waited and sat. Then we were transported by air to Japan. In Japan, we...
what kind of planes did you fly in over there?
I think they were no, these were civilian planes. And I don't remember this, they were propeller planes. We went from...
The Jeeps hadn't come in, but had the Jeeps, I mean, not the they, you know, the gotten rid of the props.
No, I don't. I think it was a prop job. We flew
okay.
from San Francisco to Honolulu.
Uh-huh.
We got out. It was hot. We were wearing our ODs.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
Then from there we went to Wake, to Guam, and to Tokyo.
Uh-huh.
Hot, hot, hot. It was fun when we were on the plane. The civilian pilots would let us come up and sit in the cockpit and see the stars, and the ocean beneath us. It was an interesting trip.
How many of you were in that plane?
I would say probably 60 or 70. I've forgotten, Bob. You know, some of these minor details.
Well, I know.
At Camp Drake, we were in an Imperial Army barracks. It wasn't heated. The only place where it was warm was where we showered. And then you went into your bunk, and fortunately we had plenty of blankets there, so we were quite comfortable. One night I remember waking up and seeing this wooden floor making waves. There had been a minor earthquake.
Oh.
And while in Japan, we were given some instruction in the Japanese language. That was interesting. I enjoyed it. It was something to do and kept us occupied.
No, it wasn't much use for your Russian language, though.
No, well, Russian was no longer important. I was in the Far East. And I did get to walk around and explore the countryside, saw the temples and the housing and the small Japanese cars still burning charcoal for fuel. I took a lot of pictures. That's where I started getting really interested in photography.
Uh-huh. What was the reception of the Japanese people by then? They'd already had the atom bomb.
Well, the Japanese people were very peaceful. They treated us well. I felt perfectly safe there.
Uh-huh.
And it was interesting exploring. I got to see the Daiichi building, December 24th, 1950. An elderly captain, I said, I'd really like to see General MacArthur. He said, let's go to the Daiichi building about 5 o'clock. Then you'll see MacArthur leaving for home. Sure enough, the general came up, pipe in one hand, took the pipe out of his mouth, saluted the Japanese across the street who were bowing to him, put the pipe back in his mouth, and stepped into a Chrysler limousine. I was quite impressed with the performance.
Yeah. Is that the only time you ever saw him?
That's the only time I ever saw him.
Uh-huh. You found quite a bit of,
Pageantry.
yeah, pageantry. You ever seen Mrs. MacArthur?
No, I never did.
Okay.
Remember, second lieutenants weren't that exalted.
Well, go ahead. And,
Well, Easter Sunday, March 1951, we proceeded over to Korea. In Korea, we were in the
how did you get over by ship?
ship. We went by a Japanese ship. We were unloaded, transported by bus to this assembly area where we stayed. That was probably the coldest place I'd ever been in. We had these squad tents. Do you remember those jerry cans they'd have, and they'd put a 5-gallon can outside and drip oil in? That was all the heat. There I had 7 blankets, a uniform I wore during the day, a uniform I slept in, and my army overcoat. And Bob, it was cold. From there I took a supply ship from Busan to Mokpo, Korea with some jeeps, some enlisted men when I reported to the Cholanamdo Civil Affairs team. There I was in charge of relief supplies, hauling lepers to the leper colony off Yosu, and
tell us about that. That was very interesting. The leper colony in Korea.
yes,
what's a leper colony like? What did you?
It was an island. It was very nice. I don't know what they had to treat leprosy then, but they wanted to get those people away from the general population. And our job was providing transport.
To take them over to this island?
Yes, and blankets, foodstuffs. Because we handled relief supplies. We had 4 ton-and-a-half-ton trucks for that purpose.
Did you, of course, we haven't seen a leper. We don't know what a leper is like. Did you get to see them? And
Yes, some of them were missing fingers. Some had their noses gone. Their face had that lion look, which seems to be one of the major symptoms of leprosy. I also dealt with some people in the civilian sector schools. I would go see what we could do for them. I remember the school, they didn't have many books, but boy, those students worked hard. One of the things that really impressed me, Bob, was I saw an elementary teacher teaching a bunch of kids sitting on logs. Perfect attention. And that really impressed me, that education could take place under such strained circumstances.
now these were leper kids?
No, these were little Korean kids.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Then in Gwangju, where I was the adjutant, which was a small sub-team from Wonju, we dealt with Korean war orphans that came in from the north. Those poor little kids were filthy. They were taken to the public baths, scrubbed. They were taken out to the 1st Marine Air Wing Air Station in Gwangju, where they were given shots and then dispersed orphanages. That was another part of my duties. Both places in Gwangju and Gangneung, I served as Korean paymaster. I used to pay the indigenous personnel. That would require from Wonju, we would leave the Marine Air Wing base midnight, fly into Busan, scrounge our supplies, pick up money, talk about personnel with a personnel man at the headquarters of the United Nations Civil Assistance Command, fly out, get back 24 hours later. That was a long day. We would get into Busan, first thing the major and I would do is shower, shave, so when we presented ourselves to the authorities, we looked reasonably presentable. You know, that was important.
The authorities, who were the authorities?
Colonel Coyle, commanding officer. He was a West Pointer, one of the finest officers I ever served under.
Okay. Well then, go on and tell about your experiences over there.
Well, in Gwangju, well, I was the junior officer everywhere. In Gwangju, we were short enlisted men, so one day the colonel said, Lebedeff, you're going up to Daejeon, and you're going to drive the Army 6x6 to pick up a load of gasoline. I said, Colonel, I've never driven a 6x6. I don't have a license for it. He said, give me your GI license. He signed it with his initials. I had a license. That's fine now. What do I do? Have Sergeant Alexander drive you around the square and show you how to shift the gears and then go. Well, the trip up wasn't very exciting, but coming back to Gwangju, I had a load of gasoline in back, and some North Korean was firing tracers over my head. I was very lucky one didn't connect with the gas tank.
Did you see much? Did you see any of the fighting at all?
No, I was in the rear area, but we were in guerrilla territory. I had 2 other very interesting experiences, Bob. I was going in with a major who had been the Korean paymaster, and we were approaching the town of Yosu. We were in a jeep, and they opened firearms. Hit the center post of the jeep windshield. I got a little fragments of glass and steel here in my neck, just scratches. So we returned fire and got into Pusan about 9 o'clock. It was dark. That was an experience.
Yeah.
So they painted merthiolate on my neck, gave me a tetanus shot. If I wanted to, I could go to the hospital. They put me on orders for a Purple Heart. I said, the heck with that.
Did you, when you speak of returning fire, how did you return fire?
I had a carbine. We just shot up in the air.
Oh.
Just maybe make them duck.
Uh-huh.
They say they found one wounded Korean up there. I don't know who. We all returned fire, so we don't know who hit him. But we did get away.
Uh-huh. Tell us about life there in Korea.
You mean as for the civilians?
Oh, okay.
All right, the civilian population, that's another thing we had to do, is observe the local markets where they'd sell cabbages for kimchi, the daikon, cucumbers, the spices, and see what the prices were. This was part of my job, reporting on the prices. The Korean population was shabbily dressed. Even in Gwangju, there were some homes that were destroyed. We had a medical doctor on our team and a sanitarian, and their job was to immunize the civilian population, take care of the sick. Korean hospital, there was a Korean hospital in Gwangju, and it was very interesting. In fact, I guess they had anesthetics. However, their care of patients was rather rudimentary. I remember seeing 4 people carrying a person up who had had surgery. They didn't have any trolleys or anything. Mm-hmm. And then they put him in a bed, and the wards were rather shabby and the like.
Were there, did you see many wounded GIs?
No, I didn't. Bob, I was not that close to the front lines. I was always back, okay, in Daejeon, Gwangju, I was probably 50 miles probably from the front. Mm-hmm. When we would go from Gwangju to Gangneung by road, we would see places where bridges had nice big holes, you could tell. Mm-hmm. There had been fighting there. One time we saw a sign, detour. The major and I took a look. We noticed that the water would drown out our Jeep. The major and I said, we're going across that bridge. When we did, they again fired on us. But that's normal procedure there. Yeah. So it was interesting.
What about the air activity? Was there fighting going on overhead?
Not where we were. In Gwangju, there was a North Korean plane. Why it flew over Gwangju every night, I don't know. But we would call that guy Bed Check Charlie. He'd come fly over, single wing, prop job, put around, then go back north.
So that you mentioned all these places. You mentioned Incheon and so on. Tell us about where those places were in Korea.
All right. Yeosu was in the south. Gwangju was in the southwesternmost province in Korea. Mokpo was the main port there. And Incheon was on the western side of Korea, fairly close to the 38th parallel. And Douglas MacArthur, that was a brilliant strategic move. I was in Korea in April 1950 when he was removed summarily by Truman. And Truman didn't have any other alternative. MacArthur, having been head of FECOM, Far Eastern Command, figured he could set policy. He wanted to bomb the Chinese. That, we were afraid, would trigger the Third World War. So MacArthur relieved him, and General Ridgway became commander. Commander of the 8th Army Forces in Korea was General James A. Van Fleet. and he did come to Gwangju. I did meet General Van Fleet. He was an impressive officer, very interested in what was going on in civil affairs. And I thought, I was surprised that he would want to talk to a lieutenant at that time, what the lieutenant was doing.
Did any of your background in the World War II have any influence on what you did at Korea?
No, it didn't. Bob, my Russian language wasn't necessary in Korea, but my training in college was the reason why, instead of being an infantry unit commander, I was in civil affairs and military government.
Yeah.
The fact that I had my master's degree in agricultural economics was a great asset.
Did that help in Korea?
Yes.
How did you put that to use?
Well, pricing, studying crops, seeing how the crops were growing. I learned quite a bit about rice culture. I never knew anything about it. We estimated harvest. We talked to people at the various schools trying to get their estimates of what the yield would be.
Say, you talked to these Koreans about this?
I had an interpreter who would go with me. I had an interpreter everywhere I went.
The principal, of course, the principal would have been rice. What other crops did they have? Any corn?
Very little, Bob. I don't remember corn. They didn't like corn particularly. It was an inferior grain in their estimation.
Yeah.
Powdered milk we distributed. My interpreter and his wife had a baby and she couldn't feed us, so we got them a big tin of powdered milk, which they reconstituted to feed their child.
Okay, well, go ahead on your experiences then in military government. Along the line here, you mentioned General Van Fleet. Any other important people that you met over there?
No, that was the only one. He was there on an inspection tour of K9. They were planning to set up a military academy there. That's how I got to meet him. There was General A.S. Champney, who was head of the Korean Military Advisory Group. He was a brigadier general, and I guess I got to drive him around in my Jeep. But I didn't meet any other personages. I did meet the governor of Cholanam-do province. The Korean Army Command would invite our unit officers to Korean meals. I got to really like Korean food. I, in fact, used to prefer eating rice on the road to K rations. Do you remember the K rations, Bob?
Sure.
I opened the eggs, they were green. I opened the sausage patties, congealed in grease. I told my interpreter, give these to the Jeep drivers, could I please have some hot rice and tea?
Yeah. But what about, did you strike up any friendships there when you were in the service?
I enjoyed Kim Jae-yoon, my interpreter, very much. We were good friends. It's hard for a...
Was he a Korean Army officer?
No, he was a Korean civilian who spoke very good English. I guess he studied it in college. It's very hard, you know, Bob, if you're a first lieutenant, to be really chummy with majors and lieutenant colonels.
Yeah, but for instance, this interpreter, was he a college student or what was he?
I would assume he was, he might have graduated from college. I now don't remember. But we became good friends. He took me once to his home, which was quite unusual. I got to meet his mother, and that was very unusual. I liked Colonel Morrison, who was commander of our Gwangju unit, because He was really a fine officer. When I got home from Korea, I was at Fort Benning. Colonel Morrison wanted me to stay in and get on his battalion staff. And I thought to myself, do I really want to do that? No way.
Yeah. Well, on the matter of what I'm getting at, did you strike up any friendships, your fellow officers, or any of the people that you were associated with?
Well, Bob, we were a small unit. There were only 4 or 5 officers on a team. I liked Major Hunter, who was commanding officer of the Wonju sub-team. Major Hunter and I were, well, I knew him from Camp Gordon days. We were fairly close. I got out, we both lost track of each other. I liked Sergeant Douglas Alexander, who was our mess sergeant in Cholanamdo. Once I left Cholanamdo, Sergeant Alexander and I we didn't have any further contact.
Have you lost complete track of all of those people now?
Yes, I have. Well, you realize, Bob, I've been out now 48 years. All of us are old men. Some of those people are older than I am.
Yeah.
I wonder if they are still around.
Yeah. Well, okay, tell us about what happened then. You were over there, and how long were you in Korea?
15 and a half months.
Okay.
3 months in Japan. Out of a 21 and a half month tour as a Category 4 officer, I spent 18 and a half months overseas.
And what you remember about being separate? You were sent home then. What happened then?
Well, I arrived back at Camp Stoneman, took a troop train to Fort Benning.
Did you fly home?
No, came home on a Liberty ship. It was a nice, slow trip. We stopped at Honolulu. They fed us well, fed us a lot of Atabrine to fight malaria.
Oh, did you have much trouble with, for instance, a lot of people had trouble with malaria. Were there any other illnesses that...
I caught pneumonia in Korea because, we would ride in open jeeps.
Yeah.
It was safer to have a jeep without a top so you could see what was going on. And I got pretty well soaked. I caught pneumonia, but Dr. Smith, our team doctor, filled me full of penicillin and I didn't have to go to the hospital for it. Otherwise, we were a healthy group. We were young. I mean, when you're 23, Bob, you think you're immortal like all these 23-year-olds do.
Yeah. And, okay, you were separated and sent home, sent to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Yes. There I was released from active duty. I went home. I think I spent, this was July. In August I went up to Champaign-Urbana to continue my education.
How long were you at Fort Benning?
Wow, I got in on a Friday. I asked the CEO of the casual company, I haven't had a leave in 18 and a half months, could I go home for the weekend? My folks were there with my car. We drove home. It was 100 degrees. I had on a tropical worsted uniform. We got off post out of Benning. I took off my shirt. Then I went home, showered, put on civilian clothes, and Bob, after wearing a uniform continuously for 18 and a half months, I felt naked in a short sleeve shirt. I remember that distinctly.
Okay, what happened after you got out of the service?
Well, I went back to Champaign-Urbana, did a year's graduate work, postmasters, then went to work for Swift & Company, worked for them for 9 years, discovered I hated sales, and decided to become a high school teacher. And I did what I really wanted, and that was to teach school.
Yeah. Did you get you must have had a teacher's license to do that. How did you get that?
I got that here in Indiana from Purdue University, which I like much better than the University of Illinois. And was in 64 and 65, and then Mark Karras hired me to come down to Crawfordsville as the economics instructor.
Yeah. You were, that'd have been 63, I'm trying to, boy, Mark had come here by then. He was a superintendent.
That is right.
Yeah.
He hired me in May of 65, and when we came back into town, Mark was at the First National Bank, and Merrill Daly was superintendent.
Yeah. Okay. And what about your teaching career then at Crawfordsville High School?
It was the highlight of my life. It's something I thoroughly enjoyed. I met some really fine young people. And it's the thing Ann and I particularly enjoy is seeing how these people mature, become responsible people, and what nice people they turn out to be.
You mentioned your wife, Ann. How did you meet her? And how did that happen?
That happened in Sunday school in Puerto Rico when I was 13.
I didn't mention that you were in Puerto Rico.
My father was at the experiment station in Rio Piedras, and we attended the church. And my dad and her dad became friends. Her dad was dean of the College of Education from UPR, University of Puerto Rico. And both fathers spoke with accents. Ann's father with a Spanish, Dad with a Russian. And the men became very good friends, and we kept up with each other. So lo and behold, I married Ann in 1953.
All right. She went to Goucher College, didn't she?
That's right. That's where your wife attended college. Ann was in the class of 50. What class was?
Oh goodness, she was in the class of 38, I think, or something like that. So that was the connection there. All right, Alex, you taught social studies, didn't you?
Economics primarily.
Oh,
and Western civilization.
oh.
Now, it's interesting how I got that assignment. Don Gallagher scanned everyone in the social studies department who had any credentials on their transcripts. Lo and behold, I had 9 hours credit in Western Civ, which I acquired after I got out of the Army the first time. You know, all of us could take these advanced placement tests. That's how I picked up those 9 hours. I never sat in a classroom for those 9 hours.
I was thinking about that. You were teaching. I think you taught some of our kids, didn't you?
I taught both of them, Helen and
did you? And
not Bob, Brad, Helen and Brad.
Brad, yeah, that's right.
And you still speak to me, Bob, which I appreciate.
He's a long way off. But anyway, did this experience that you had in the service have any effect on your teaching?
Absolutely.
It broadened your...
It broadened my perspective. I had seen an underdeveloped economy at first hand. I understood the problems. Economics. I could relate to the kids, the lack of industry, and how it was basically an agricultural economy. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, I bring in articles from the Wall Street Journal describing changes in Korea. The Wall Street Journal was an invaluable teaching tool.
Uh-huh.
I still read it, as a matter of fact.
And I was going to ask you, Alex, about how long did you teach? How long?
Okay, I taught a year on permit in Chalmers High School, then I got my credentials. I was here from 1965 to 1991, 26 years at old Crawfordsville High School.
Yeah. You did never teach at the
new facility? No, I did not.
Yeah. how do you feel about the building down there where you used to be a teacher?
Oh, you mean the Athena Center?
Yeah.
I am impressed how nice it looks. It is a beautiful facility. You know, that's a lovely
Almost makes you wish
prairie-style
you were
architecture.
eligible to move there.
Unfortunately, Bob, you and I don't qualify.
Okay, well, let's call it a halt here and take a pause.
Okay.
Okay, Alex, tell us a bit about your background in connection with Russia or the Ukraine.
All right, well, Dad was born in the Ukraine. He went to Kiev Polytechnic Institute after going to Russian Orthodox Seminary. Dad was a seminarian. However, he did not wish to become ordained because he said, as a 20-year-old kid, how could I advise some 75-year-old man about marital problems or spiritual problems? So he went to Kiev Polytechnic. World War I came along. Dad was commissioned second lieutenant. Fought. Then the revolution occurred in 1917. Dad joined the White Army. Dad,
that was tough.
it was. Dad was in the last campaign of the Crimea with General Wrangel. Dad realized he couldn't stay because all officers were being summarily shot, so he hopped on a coal ship and went to Yugoslavia. And he was a refugee in Zagreb, sleeping on tables at the Agricultural Institute there, where he was a student. And his cousins, who were Russian Orthodox priests in New York, sent him money so Dad could immigrate to the United States. Dad arrived in the United States in 1923.
Yeah.
And married Mom in 25, went back to Connecticut Agricultural College, acquired his bachelor's, master's at Cornell, PhD at Cornell.
Now, what about your mother?
Mother's family came from the old Russo-Polish border town of Grodno. My grandfather was a college student. He unfortunately made some adverse comments about Russian government, so the family said, "John, you're going to the United States." So grandfather arrived in New Britain, Connecticut. He owned his own grocery store. I don't know whether he married Grandma in Russia or New Britain, but they lived in the Connecticut area until their deaths. Grandpa in 1950, Grandma in 1975 or 6. And Mother was born in 1906 of Russian parents. My grandparents were rather unusual people. My grandfather was instrumental in organizing the Russian Orthodox Church in New Britain, Connecticut. He was a very bright man, very warm, very sincere. I had the good luck of spending a year with him during World War II, when food was tough and to acquire in Puerto Rico. My folks sent me to Plainville, Connecticut. That was a fine experience. I got to realize what wonderful people I had as grandparents.
Is your mother still living?
Yes, she's 94 years old. She's in a nursing home now. And she's happy, Bob. Let's put it that way. Mom's not what she was when you knew her. She's changed. But that's to be expected at 94.
She speaks
several languages. Mother speaks Russian, Polish, Spanish, some French, and I don't know what else. But Mother was gifted linguistically.
Now, Alex, what have you done since your retirement? What's been your activity?
Well, I'm active at St. John's. I'm a lesson reader, chalice bearer. I'm on the board of the Montgomery County Historical Society, an activity which I thoroughly enjoy. And thanks to Mike, our director, and Bob Straw, director of the Linden Railroad Museum, I work there once a month during the summer. And that is an interesting experience. You know, Bob, this is the way you can give back to a community where you're happy. Also, for a while, right after retirement, to transition from being fully employed to fully retired. I worked 5 years with the international students at Wabash College as a volunteer. That was fun too. And I used to feed them and enjoy them.
Yeah.
But then Ann said, your driving skills are deteriorating, Alex. I don't want you to go to Indianapolis twice in a day. You better give that up. She's probably right, but I hate to admit it.
Yeah.
You know how wives are, Bob.
Well, we sure do. Thank you. Alex, I guess we've about covered the waterfront.
Yes, sir.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Okay.